Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Amherst. I'm Reverend Michelle Buhite, the minister of this congregation. My pronouns, which I offer to create a truly inclusive and brave space for all to live into the fullness of their identities, are she and her. This is our second week of in-person worship since we closed our doors in March 2020 due to the pandemic. In addition to in-person worship, we will continue to offer services online in whatever form that best honors our staff and volunteers' energy and workload. This is a time of some anxiety and incredible opportunity, and it is my hope that each of you will find the best way for you to be in relationship with this beloved community.
My name is Angela Warren, UU Amherst Director of Faith Development. My pronouns, which I offer to create a truly inclusive and brave space for all to live into the fullness of their identities, are she and her. We begin our time together by lighting the chalice. The flaming chalice is the symbol of Unitarian Universalism, the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of our commitment to bring more justice and compassion to a hurting world. Our chalice lighting words today come from the Reverend Joel Cherry. If we have any hope of transforming the world and changing ourselves, we must be bold enough to step into our discomfort, brave enough to be clumsy there, loving enough to forgive ourselves and others. May we, as a people of faith, be granted the strength to be so bold, so brave, and so loving. It's been said that Unitarian Universalism is the religion that puts its faith in you, trusting each individual to engage in the spiritual journey and to reach our own conclusions about spiritual matters. We do that in beloved community as we support one another in faith and in friendship. In that spirit, this congregation has created a covenant, a sacred promise of how we will strive to be with one another. Please join me in speaking our covenant. Together we promise to gather in compassionate community, to celebrate diversity of thought and unity of spirit, and to seek wholeness for ourselves, our children, and our world. As we gather, we acknowledge that our church is built on occupied land that once belonged to the First Nations people of this region, the Haudenosaunee. Today, we also extend gratitude to all of the water protectors in Minnesota who are protesting the continuation of the Line 3 pipeline through the state. We say to Yahweh, thank you in the Seneca language, to those arrested in the name of climate justice, and to all the organizations and individuals who are putting their bodies on the line for the healthy continuation of life on the beautiful blue boat we call Earth.
In the deeds we accomplish, we find
opening reading this morning is from that beloved philosopher, Dr. Seuss. This is the story of the Zacks. One day, making tracks in the prairie of Prax, came a north-going Zacks and a south-going Zacks. And it happened that both of them came to a place where they bumped. There they stood, foot to foot, face to face. "Look here now," the north-going Zack said. "I say, you are blocking my path. You are right in my way. I am a north-going Zack, and I always go north. Get out of my way now, and let me go forth." "Who's in whose way?" snapped the south-going Zacks. "I always go south, making south-going tracks. So you're in my way, and I ask you to move, to let me go south in my south-going groove." Then the north-going Zacks puffed his chest up with pride. "I never," he said, "take a step to one side. And I'll prove to you that I won't change my ways if I have to keep standing here 59 days. "And I'll prove to you," yelled the south-going Zacks, "that I can stand here in the prairie of Prax for 59 years, for I live by a rule that I learned as a boy back in south-going school. Never budge, that's my rule, never budge in the least, not an inch to the west, not an inch to the east. I'll stay here, not budging. I can and I will, if it makes you and me and the whole world stand still." Well, of course the world didn't stand still. The world grew. In a couple of years, the new highway came through, and they built it right over those two stubborn Zacks, and they left them there standing, unbudged in their tracks. If only our conflicts were as unambiguous as that of these two stubborn creatures. And how tediously familiar it is to realize that if two parties could simply find a way to move an inch or so in one direction or another, everyone could achieve what they came there for and enjoy friendly coexistence. They could even create a community. Today is the second service in the three-part series, The Big Comeback. When our Director of Faith Development, Angela, and I imagined the return to in-person worship, we at first thought a week-long, evening, all-ages summer church school would give us an opportunity to make our returning an intentional one. Each evening would be a mini retreat to heal wounds and gain skills that had become rusty over the course of the pandemic isolation. Then we realized how unrealistic it was to imagine that a critical mass of our beloved community could set aside that kind of time to engage in the noble endeavor of returning well. Sometimes, when noble endeavors collide with practicality, the endeavor is abandoned. But we quickly realized that we had a built-in opportunity to capture our why, returning well, by reframing our how, trading a week of evening sessions for a few Sunday mornings when y'all would already be tuned into church. We call that a win-win. Understanding our why and being flexible with our how has been the subject of many of my conversations with you over the last couple of years. It's nice to know it works in real life. Last week we talked about embracing and celebrating change. We used as our point of departure science fiction writer Octavia Butler's Earthseed proclamation. All that we touch, we change. All that we change, changes us. The only lasting truth is change. God is change. We learned that change can be exhilarating and exhausting. After nearly a year and a half apart, there was no way we could just open the doors and pick up where we left off. We had changed. Our expectations of church and of one another could not remain the same. We are co-creators in creative interchange. We are the instruments of change. Today our focus is on relationships. When we closed our doors in March of 2020, our ongoing conversation simply stopped. Some things were left unsaid, and some hurtful conversations had no resolution. Add to that the prickliness that comes from fear and uncertainty, compounded by the strange combination of intimacy and unreality produced by meeting via computer or phone, and the stage was set for miscommunication and ruptured relationships. It is highly unlikely that we will heal all of that over the course of our time here this morning. However, I do believe we can dust off the tools of restoration and reconciliation and begin to mend the frayed edges of the tapestry of our life together. We can remember that simply moving one little inch to the side of our intractability can make way for peaceful coexistence and meaningful community. Each of us has the power to reframe our how of relationship as we live into our covenant, our great why. Together we promise to gather in compassionate community, to celebrate diversity of thought and unity of spirit, and to seek wholeness for ourselves, our children, and our world.
Our Time for All Ages is a story called The Quarreling Book by Charlotte Zolotow, illustrated by Arnold Lobel. It was a rainy, gray morning, and Mr. James forgot to kiss Mrs. James goodbye when he left for the office. Mrs. James felt quite cross about this, and because the rain made the day so gray. So when Jonathan James came downstairs for breakfast, she was sharp with him. "Oh, for goodness sakes," she said. "Why did you wear that shirt again today? It's filthy." The shirt looked clean to Jonathan, and he thought her unfair. Because of this, and because the rain made the day so gray, he turned on Sally James when she came down for breakfast. "Can't you ever get down in time?" he said. "You'll be late to school for sure." The clock said 8:15, which was the time she was supposed to come down, and she thought Jonathan was completely unreasonable. Because of this, and because the rain made the day so gray, when Sally got to school and met her best friend Marjorie in the hall, she looked at her and said, "Where'd you get that awful raincoat? The color is putrid." Marjorie, who thought the raincoat was a beautiful shade of yellow, felt Sally was very unpleasant. And because of this, and because the rain made the day so gray anyway, when she got home from school and found her little brother playing with her dolls, she said, "Why are you such a pain? You're always playing with my stuff." Eddie, her little brother, always played with her dolls, and she had never minded before, and he thought her most unkind. Because of this, and because he couldn't go outdoors to play in the rain, Eddie went to his room and shoved the dog off the bed where the dog was sleeping. But the dog didn't mind the rain. She thought Eddie was playing, so she put her front paws down and her hind quarters up, and her tail began wagging. She pounced on Eddie, and they rolled over and over, wrestling together, until the dog won and sat down on Eddie's chest and began licking his face. This tickled and made him laugh, and he was laughing so hard that when Marjorie came in looking for a pencil for her math homework, he gave her his best one with a brand new eraser. She was so grateful she couldn't help smiling and saying, "Thank you very much." She started out of the room and then turned back. "You really aren't a pain," she said. She couldn't find the paper she'd copied the problems on, and she had to call up Sally to get them. She forgot she was mad at her. "Hello, Sally," she said, and she sounded so friendly that Sally was sorry she had said that about the raincoat. She gave Marjorie the homework and said, "It's really not so bad, that raincoat. You just have to get used to the color." Then she hung up feeling better and ran back upstairs, humming to herself. She met Jonathan at the top of the staircase. "Hi there, Johnny," she said. "I wasn't late at all." And she smiled at him so pleasantly that Jonathan said, "I was just teasing you." "It's okay," said Sally. Just then Mrs. James came down the hall. Jonathan said, "I'll put this in the laundry tonight for sure, Mom." And Mrs. James was so pleased that he remembered, she said, "All right, dear, I couldn't have hung the wash in all this rain anyhow. Tomorrow will do as well." Around 5 o'clock, the sun came out. Everything looked glistening and clean, and the birds began to sing, just as Mr. James came home, and gave Mrs. James a great warm hello kiss before he went upstairs to wash for dinner.
Angela introduced me to this book this week in our Wednesday meeting, and I was instantly charmed. The first half of the book is a bit predictable. One shaming comment or disappointment leads to an uncharitable remark or action, and the snowball effect takes over. One small oversight leads to a whole family plus friends having a lousy day. Nothing earth-shattering occurred. Nobody devolved into violence. What a relief. It was just a painfully ordinary day, with all of the slings and arrows that make regular life harder and more disconnected than it needs to be. And then something happens to shift the energy. I have to tell you, I was a little nervous when the dog entered the story. I worked for a domestic violence agency, and I know that sometimes the most vulnerable persons in the household, whether that is children or animals, take the brunt of the pent-up frustrations. But not so in this story. In this story, the family dog is just Key's wonderful self. Present, ready for play, being Key's doggy self. Did you notice the gender-neutral and non-human person-affirming pronoun I used there? Key expressed affection and true presence, and everything shifted. I love that the story does a complete reversal, with each person, human and otherwise, infected by joyful presence. But it doesn't stop there. Each person then reaches out to remedy the incidental harms that were caused along the way. They take responsibility without being overcome by shame and trying to shift the discomfort to be someone else's fault. It's a miracle, or at least fiction. Of course, it doesn't need to be fiction. Art sometimes imitates life. It could be a case of compassionate self-realization and a willingness to value the relationship over one's perceived status in the community. Is it more important to be loving or to be right? I don't often engage in either-or binary thinking, but this is an important area for me. Do I value my perceived standing in the community over the relationships that make up the community? This is a legitimate question we can ask ourselves when we are feeling vulnerable, misunderstood, shamed, or attacked. What is the most important thing here? That I prove I am right? Or that I can be humble enough to acknowledge that, whether or not I intended it, I may have caused harm? One of the newer learnings for me in restorative practices is to understand the gradations of intent and impact. Our words or actions may not be intended to harm, but the impact on another can be harmful. I may forget to use the correct pronouns for my non-binary friend. I didn't intend to cause harm, but they may experience the harm of not being truly seen and accepted for who they are. One teensy slip on my part can cause pain and rupture a relationship. Is it irreparable? Not necessarily. If my friend trusts me and is willing to accept my sincere apology and commitment to do better, but it's not all up to them. I need to be willing to acknowledge my mistake, even if it feels small, and to be courageous enough to have a hard conversation. I also need to release my expectation for the result of that conversation. They may not be able to forgive me. I might leave that conversation feeling worse, and that has to be okay. The work of restoration and reconciliation is neither easy nor predictable, and yet we have to do it if we are serious about being a beloved community that is open and growing and woven together by covenant. Each of us needs to learn how to use the tools of restoration and reconciliation. In this beloved community, we have a restoration team that is trained to facilitate the hard conversations that can help to heal ruptured relationships. That's great. And it is a supportive group that can help to manage and cultivate healing. And we are each responsible for our own words and actions and the impact that goes beyond our intention. I'm not perfect. If my legacy with this congregation is as the minister who was willing to say I'm sorry and accept responsibility for my words and actions, then it will be a good legacy, and I will have modeled how to be a good ancestor. Healthy relationships are much more important to me than being right. Angela and I have another story to share with you. It's a story I've shared a few times over the years, but it is such a dramatic example of what it means to mend fences and heal hearts. We just needed to offer it again today.
This is a North American traditional story called Old Joe and the Carpenter. Old Joe lived way out in the countryside all by himself. His best friend was also his closest neighbor. It seemed that they had grown old together. Now that their spouses had passed on and their children were raised and living lives of their own, all they had left were their farms and each other. But for the first time in their long friendship, they'd had a serious disagreement. It was a silly argument over a stray calf that neither one of them really needed. The calf was found on the neighbor's land, and he claimed it as his own. Old Joe said, "No, now that calf has the same markings as one of my cows, and I say it belongs to me." They were stubborn men, and neither would give in. Rather than hit each other, they just stopped talking and stomped off to their respective doors and slammed them shut. 2 weeks went by without a word between them. Come Saturday morning, Old Joe heard a knock on his front door. He wasn't expecting anyone and was surprised to find a young man who called himself a traveling carpenter standing on his porch. He had a wooden toolbox at his feet, and there was kindness in his eyes. "I'm looking for work," he explained. "I'm good with my hands, and if you have a project or two, I'd like to help you out." Old Joe replied, "Yes, as a matter of fact, I do have a job for you. See that house way over yonder? That's my neighbor's house. You see that creek running along our property line? That creek wasn't there last week. He did that to spite me. He hitched a plow to his tractor and dug that creek bed from the upper pond right down the property line. Then he flooded it. Now we got this creek to separate us. I'm so darn mad at him. I've got lumber in my barn, boards, posts, everything you'll need to build me a fence. A tall fence, all along that creek. Then I won't have to see his place no more. That'll teach him." The carpenter smiled and said, "I'll do a good job for you." The old man had to go to town for supplies, so he hitched up his wagon and left for the day. The young carpenter carried the lumber from the barn to the creekside and started to work. He worked hard and he worked fast. He measured, sawed, and nailed those boards into place all day long without stopping for lunch. With the setting of the sun, he started to put his tools away. He had finished his project. Old Joe pulled up, his wagon full of supplies. When he saw what the carpenter had built, he couldn't speak. It wasn't a fence. Instead, a beautiful footbridge, with handrails and all, reached from one side of the creek to the other. Just then, Old Joe's neighbor crossed the bridge. His hand stuck out, and he said, "I'm right sorry about our misunderstanding, Joe. The calf is yours. I just want us to go on being good friends." "You keep the calf," said Old Joe. "I want us to be friends, too. The bridge was this young fellow's idea, and I'm glad he did it." The carpenter hoisted his toolbox onto his shoulder and started to leave. "Wait," said Joe. "You're a good man. My neighbor and I can keep you busy for weeks." The carpenter smiled and said, "I'd like to stay, but I can't. I have more bridges to build." And he walked down the road, whistling a happy tune as he went.
Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you, will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends reach out to you? Will you reach out to me? With building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you. Will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmonies. Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you. Will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony. Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you. Will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony.
Oh my goodness, what a great story. It is so human. Two friends, unwilling to bend, in this story creating a literal rift with the addition of the creek between their properties. I'm right, you're wrong, no middle ground, no easy way to come together once the damage is done. Each simmering in their outraged righteousness, while deep down, missing the beauty of their friendship. We all do this, with friends, with family, with political opponents, taking a hard line with no possibility of middle ground. And if we are incredibly lucky, someone comes along to disrupt that righteous indignation, point out the good that still exists, and help us build a bridge of reconciliation and restoration. In the story, the bridge didn't come out of nowhere. The materials had to be provided. And old Joe, well, he had to trust the mysterious carpenter to build the right thing while he went into town for supplies. Who are you in the story? That's actually a bit of a trick question because all of us are all of the characters. Sometimes we are old Joe, tasked with providing the materials of reconciliation. Sometimes we are the neighbor who is willing to swallow his pride and make the first move after the bridge is built. And sometimes we are the bridge builders, the ones with the skills and vision to use our gifts to restore that which has been broken, spanning the rift with something that is beautiful, strong, and lasting. Last week, I closed the service with the acknowledgement that we are co-creators with God through the process of creative interchange, that God is a process, not a being, and that God is the manifestation of our highest aspirations, an emergent reflection and transcendence of all we humans long for and have the potential of being. That is the source of love that transforms us as we cannot transform ourselves. It is the cradle of love that holds us, that challenges us, that weaves the tapestry of beloved community. It is the love that calls us to and supports our efforts in reconciliation and restoration.
There is a love holding me. There is a love holding all that are loved. There is a love holding all. I rest in this love. There is a love rest in this love. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding all. We rest in this love. We rest in this love.
Thank you for joining us in worship today. I hope you have been inspired and uplifted by sharing this time together. Please see the credits at the end of this service for information about the music and other worship elements. And do take a moment to visit our website, uuamherst.org, and click on the giving link, or text your gift to 833-987-1968.
We extinguish our chalice with these familiar words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
A benediction is a blessing, a way to close the sacred space we have shared and to transition to our regular lives, knowing we are deeply connected even when apart. These parting words come from Laurelyn Bellamy. If here you have found freedom, take it with you into the world. If you have found comfort, go and share it with others. If you have dreamed dreams, help one another that they may come true. If you have known love, give some back to a bruised and hurting world. Go in peace.